Call the meeting to order. Bonjour, collègues. Today is meeting number 25 of the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development. This meeting is taking place in a hybrid format and is in public. We are meeting with the Honourable Julie Dabroussen, Minister of Environment, Climate Change and Nature, for 1 hour. Government officials will remain for the second hour. Time permitting, the committee will consider amendments or recommendations to the bill at the end of testimony at the will of the committee. If necessary, the committee has also scheduled Tuesday, February the 24th, as a day for considering amendments or recommendations to Bill C-15. I would also like to take a few minutes in the second hour to issue drafting instructions to the analysts for drafting the report on the electrical vehicle availability standard. For those in person, please follow the health and safety guidelines as per on the cards on the table to prevent audio or feedback incidents. I have this little yellow card, so just to give you a heads up what time you have left in speaking, and once I turn it over, please just end your sentence kindly. Donc, le comité.
The committee is starting its study on the subject matter of clauses 595 and 596, Division 42 of Bill C-15, an act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on November 4th, 2025.
Minister Dabroussen is accompanied by the following witnesses. From the Department of Environment, Alison McDermott, Assistant Deputy Minister, Strategic Policy and International Affairs Branch, Megan Nichols, Assistant Deputy Minister, Environmental Protection Branch, and Stephanie Lane, Executive Director, Legislative Governance. So, Minister Dabroussen, you have up to 5 minutes, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chair, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are gathered on the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, and also to take a moment before I begin my formal remarks to acknowledge the tragic news that we have heard from Tumbler Ridge and also from Kitigan Zibi. As someone who has had a mass tragedy in my own community along the Danforth, I know how much it means when we can see people from across the country lean in and show strength in a time of grieving. And so I just really want to thank everyone around this table. I know we've all come together to show that support for the community and to just really say my heart is with the victims, the survivors, all of the people who have loved ones who they have lost who are grieving today, and that may their memories be a blessing.
Today, I will speak to the proposed amendments to the Canadian Environmental Protection Act 1999, known as SEPA, contained in Part 5, Division 42 of Bill C-15.
Stone legislation for preventing pollution, protecting the environment and human health. It enables federal action on a wide range of environmental and human health risks, from chemicals and waste to air and water pollution. It also supports collaboration across governments through mechanisms such as administrative and equivalency agreements. Une entente administrative, c'est une entente de travail.
An administrative agreement is a work-sharing arrangement between the Minister of the Environment and other governments in Canada, including Indigenous partners. They can cover inspections, enforcement, monitoring, reporting, and coordinating responses to environmental incidents such as oil or chemical releases.
These
agreements are already in place in several provinces and territories and help streamline oversight while strengthening public safety.
Are a long-standing feature of SEPA. They allow the federal government to stand down certain federal regulations where another government's laws are equivalent. Over the years, the federal government has entered into such agreements with provinces including British Columbia, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, notably for oil and gas methane regulations. Ces accords servent à réduire les chevauchements.
These agreements reduce regulatory duplication and allow industry to comply with a single, tailored regulatory system. Division 42, that's in Part 5 of Bill C-15, proposes targeted amendments to clarify and improve the operation of these provisions. First, this division would remove the 5-year statutory limit on administrative and equivalency agreements. This would provide greater flexibility, reduce unnecessary renegotiation, and support stable, long-term intergovernmental cooperation, all while creating more predictable conditions for industry to invest in clean technologies.
This would clarify that another government's provisions must be, and I kind of put this in quotes just to be clear, equivalent in effect to SEPA regulations, codifying existing practice. These changes would apply prospectively, meaning current agreements would continue under their existing terms. Ensemble, ces modifications renforceraient.
Together, the amendments strengthen SEPA as a practical, cooperative tool for environmental protection.
I'll briefly turn to the climate competitiveness strategy. Launched in Budget 2025, the strategy supports emissions reductions while strengthening Canada's economic position through clear, predictable rules that attract investment and drive innovation. Progress is already underway. In December, the government released a discussion paper on targeted amendments to the clean fuel regulations, with consultations concluding in January. Once finalized, these amendments would strengthen Canada's low-carbon fuel sector while maintaining core emission reduction objectives. The strategy is also delivering results across major industrial sources. Enhanced methane regulations for the oil and gas sector and new methane regulations for landfills were finalized last year in close partnership with provinces. Under the Canada-Alberta Memorandum of Understanding, Canada has committed to entering into a new agreement that would stand down federal methane regulations in favor of an updated Alberta provincial regime. Carbon pricing remains a central pillar of this approach. It is the most cost-effective way to reduce emissions while encouraging innovation and efficiency and positioning industry to make the best choices as Canada builds and decarbonizes. Importantly, proceeds from industrial carbon pricing are reinvested directly into Canadian industry. As of 2025, the Decarbonization Incentive Program has supported over $874 million in investments across 53 clean energy projects. And finally, because I know that time is close, clean, reliable, affordable electricity is essential to achieve net zero by 2050. The government is investing billions to unlock investment and make it more attractive to build on our clean power advantage. We're working with provinces and territories to advance a net zero electricity grid supported by significant investment tools, including the Canada Growth Fund and Clean Economy Investment Tax Credits, which I would point out are in this Budget Implementation Act. Mr. Chair, I would be pleased to answer questions from the committee.
Thank you, Minister. Donc, on va commencer avec le Parti conservateur pour 6 minutes.
We will begin with the Conservative Party. You have 6 minutes. Ms. Anst.
For appearing today, and I also appreciate the leverage that the committee has given us to address any concerns that we have. Minister, in light of the recent announcements around Chinese EVs, I'm curious if you will personally be permitted under current federal security guidance to drive a Chinese manufactured electric vehicle, yes or no?
So first of all, I think that we should place this within the larger automobile strategy, which was a great news announcement that we had last week for industry and for environment. No, I will answer your question. I am happy to purchase any EVs that are available on the market in Canada.
Including Chinese manufactured EVs, Minister?
Purchase any EV that's available for purchase in Canada.
So no
at the time that I would purchase it. But
So no security risk for any EV, Chinese EV manufactured in China?
No, and I will go on to also add in, though, we're talking about also investing in building EVs here in Canada.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. I'm curious also about what coordination your department has undertaken with Public Safety Canada, Innovation, Science and Economic Development and Privacy Commissioner to access cybersecurity, data sovereignty and national security risks associated with connected vehicles in general.
To be frank, this would be part of, like I said, ECCC is not working on connectivity science, but I can assure you that as a whole,
it's relevant, though, Minister, because we're opening this up now, and you're responsible for these electric vehicle mandates, and you're responsible for these electric vehicles coming into Canada. And with all respect, they do collect a lot of personal information. And so I'm just curious, since you are the minister responsible, if you've coordinated with these other departments as a way to protect Canadians.
So let me just back that out for 2 seconds, because you use the word mandate, and in fact, if you were listening to the announcement last week, one of the really important pieces of it is moving to GHG regulations as to how we're moving forward. So that's the first part that I think I just wanted to clarify. Sure. But secondly, of course, as a whole of government approach, across all of our ministerial offices, we are working to make sure that Canadians have access to the best, most affordable vehicles, and frankly, also to support our auto workers right here in Canada because they build the best vehicles.
I appreciate that, Minister, but I'm speaking specifically about the security. And I think that's also an important part of the conversation. And so I'm just wondering if you could address it from that perspective.
Now, so let's also kind of take a moment for history here, which is that these vehicles were available in Canada previously, and I think up to 2021. The numbers that we are talking about bringing back into Canada would match those numbers. They're a capped number.
It's not important. It's not important then? Is that the short answer? It's okay. I can move on.
Hey, I'm happy if you want to move on, but I think my main point is that all vehicles that are sold in Canada are vehicles that we are absolutely comfortable and believe that Canadians should have access to when we're talking about affordability and vehicles being built right here in Canada, which is the main motivation of the work that we're doing to support our auto workers. We are also encouraging investments in that industry at the same time.
Chinese EV manufacturers are receiving massive state subsidies to expand globally. Has your department assessed whether this strategy could result in Canada becoming dependent on these foreign-controlled vehicle technology and software?
As I'd mentioned earlier, the number of vehicles that would be brought in from China is capped, and that the most important part of the announcement we made was auto strategy, and it was being cheered on by auto workers on the floor, is that we are putting in place a suite of measures that's actually encouraging investment for vehicles to be built right here in Canada. As an Ontario MP, that is something I know is so important to our economy.
Yeah, sure, fair enough, but that doesn't mean that we just turn a blind eye to the security risks. I mean, I think as responsible parliamentarians, it's a question that needs to be asked, and it's something that the government should be taking seriously. I mean, the Canadian government had a very different position on this just a few years ago, and now it seems like it's not at all a concern. So I just want to be sure, based on that, where you stand on it, because I do think it's an important question.
I believe I have actually answered now in many different ways, many times. I am comfortable with any vehicle that will be sold here in Canada, and that I also have never seen the Conservatives support any EVs and any manufacturer of any EVs and the affordability in getting these vehicles to Canadians, which Canadians want. Globally, 1 in 4 vehicles being sold right now is an EV. Why would you hold us back from that?
Well, I'm not suggesting that we hold you back. I'm suggesting that we're responsible in the way that we roll these in, and we make sure that we protect Canadians. I'm not suggesting that we don't move forward, Minister, with all due respect. But
supporting actually moving forward on getting EVs built here in Canada and making sure that Canadians have rebates to buy those vehicles and that we have affordable vehicles.
My time is up.
Go ahead.
No.
One last comment. Go ahead.
No, that's fine.
Flexible today.
It's okay. I'm fine.
Thank you very much. Monsieur Saint-Pierre, la parole est à vous.
Thank you.
Mr. St. Pierre, you have the floor.
Acknowledging Tumbler Ridge yesterday. It's been a very difficult moment for everybody, including myself. I've got two young daughters of 6 and 10, so thank you for acknowledging the tragic losses and the hard time that Canada is going through right now. Secondly, despite the obstructive behavior from the opposition, I would actually like to congratulate you on the auto strategy. Our committee had been doing a lot of work around the EV availability standard, and a lot of the findings, actually one from our colleague, was about the lack of charging infrastructure in Newfoundland, which our government is addressing through a $1.5 billion loan through Canada Infrastructure Bank. So I just want to commend you for the very exciting auto strategy announcement last week. Je vais peut-être procéder en français, si vous me permettez.
I may now switch to French with your permission. I would also like to thank you for being so generous as to come before the committee here, Environment. You have often come before us. Thank you for being so generous. I would like to put a question about the topic that we are covering today, being clauses 595 and 596 of Division 42. How will these clauses contribute to a better environment, healthier and less toxic? Thank you for the question, and thank you for beginning with, indeed, this issue. I think this is a good time for all Canadians, whether or not we have children and are thinking of their future, to really think of the importance of community. Considering what is put forward in this bill, which you have just mentioned, it's really about how we can better work with provinces and territories to ensure that when we do have policies and administration to manage, it works well together. We have a very large country, and there are differences across regions in the way things work, the way things are administered, and, how best to manage. So having the capacity to enter into equivalency agreements with provinces is truly important. It will allow us to ensure that, yes, we lay out aims and targets. We want to get there altogether, but perhaps we could get there in different ways, depending on what part of the country you're in. What we have here now is something that supports this sort of negotiation, the sorts of equivalency agreements. And moreover, what I would say is that we now have solely 5-year agreements, such that we need to continually restart negotiations. This leads to a lot of work. Being able to have longer-term agreements will really ensure that these agreements work better and won't be as wasteful, really. Thank you. I know that this is a rather technical text, but could you tell us about the positive effects that these changes would usher in? To begin with, as I have said, one of the main changes is that whereas in the past, these agreements only lasted 5 years before they were terminated, but now, rather than having this continuous need to renegotiate the agreement with the province or territory, rather than having it continue, well, let's say, for example, electricity regulations. Just as they get going, they would get going in 2035, they would get underway, and if we negotiate now to set that in, the agreement would continue beyond 2035. So how can we work with the provinces to ensure this long-term applicability up to 2050 in the regulations? That's what we're aiming for. So how can we ensure that we've got these long-term agreements in place to help us better plan with provinces and territories how to reach our targets? And this will lead to much less time wastage. Thank you. You have mentioned the methane regulations, which requires a good deal of collaboration with the provinces. And on these changes then, the equivalency agreements, this would allow for cooperation between the federal government and provincial governments. And perhaps with clauses 595 and 596, then could you tell us a bit more about the work that you have undertaken to keep a good dialogue up and running with the provinces? Look, the methane issue is of the highest importance. This is an area in which we can truly reduce greenhouse gases. The regulations that we set in December have already reduced by 400 megatons, or will reduce by 400 megatons, the amount of methane released into the Canadian environment. So this is a big change. So to follow up on that, we have agreements that we have already reached regarding other regulations in the past. They exist with the provinces, and this new approach will help us work better with those. Let's take Alberta as an example. We had an equivalency agreement regarding methane with Alberta, and they overperformed. So this gives them the ability to work based on how things operate in their area. And we got really good results, good for the country overall. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. St-Pierre. Mr. Bonin, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Madam Minister, for having joined us here today. A number of points I'd like to touch on. Let me go back to the matter of Chinese electric vehicles. As a Bloc Québécois, we put forward a bill that would prevent the entry to Canada of any product that was made with forced labor, including child labor, and this is a concern we have about what's going on in China. So did you examine this bill, and do you think it would be a good idea for Canada to ensure that we are not using any forced labor to produce these vehicles? Two things I will say to this. First, in Canada, we do have protections in place, and we protect our workers considerably. And when it comes to onboarding investment from other countries and attracting it, well, we'll continue to protect our workers. We already have within our government and applied by our government a number of policies to manage our relationships with other countries in regard to such protections. It remains important. So first, it's really important that this be a consideration around the world.
C'est important qu'on s'assure qu'on a des bons emplois ici dans notre pays et qu'on protège nos travailleurs et travailleuses.
Sure. Point of order. The translation. Sorry.
It's important that we protect our Canadian workers.
Traduction.
So, Mr. Bonin, can you hear me? Very well, then continue, please. So, vehicles produced in China. The bill that we put forward was to ensure that there be no forced child labor, and there isn't such a measure at the federal level. So would you at least look at the bill that we're proposing to tell us whether these are measures that Canada can adopt? Look, I'm always ready to look at what you put forward, and I think that everyone around the table will say that, we all agree that we need to ensure that we protect our workers and workers everywhere in the world. So, yes, I'm certainly ready to look at that document. Very well, so I expect you to get back to me on that. So, vehicles at this point, there are some barriers to importing EU vehicles to Canada because their security standards are not considered to be equivalent to ours, and that's an issue. There aren't as many European cars here than there are, let's say, in Mexico or in other countries of the world. Could you tell me whether this measure will be corrected to allow for more EU vehicles to be imported to Canada? Well, what we have done, there were the Chinese vehicles you were just mentioning, but then there's everything we've done to ensure that we're better able to build cars and vehicles here. We have a reduction to rebate for Canadians to ensure that they will be able to buy electric vehicles more easily, make them more affordable. and we're also setting out to build them here, along with this rebate. We're also trying to strike agreements to ensure that more companies come here. I think this is truly important. Of course, affordability is an issue, but it's also a matter of having jobs in Canada, good jobs. And this is what I'm focused on, how to ensure that we can build the vehicles here. Yes, but when it comes to importing vehicles, are you aware that there are standards, security standards, that aren't considered equivalent and such that a number of EU vehicles can't be sold in Canada? I'm not sure if this is the right word, security or safety, or perhaps it's the way they calculate greenhouse gas emissions. But I can say that in matters of being able to afford vehicles, let's say the people who are working in Bécancour in Quebec who are building vehicles here in Canada, I want to ensure that we have these good jobs here in Canada building vehicles of the future. We have a very good sector here. I'm giving that example, Bécancour. But how can we continue to support it and do even better, keeping in mind affordability thanks to the rebates? So you undertake to examine the standards with Transport Canada to ensure that the vehicles that we are mentioning from Europe are able to be sold in Canada? I would say it's up to Transport to look and handle the details of this, how this will work in detail. But I can say that as a government, we will address affordability via rebates and also by building the vehicles here in Canada. So good. So you undertake to discuss your colleague. This is with your colleague at Transportation. Thank you. So there is an important issue regarding recycling lithium batteries in a plant in Quebec. The plant in Quebec is likely to close and even be liquidated as of tomorrow. There is a need for $30 million alone. That's what the business is asking for, to be able to keep their doors open. Right now, the batteries will be sent to the United States with the critical minerals in them. It's a matter of recycling, an important part of the production chain. There's such a need for essential and critical minerals. So is this an issue that is on your desk, the fact that we're about to lose this excellent Quebec plant and company, and will you move on that by tomorrow? Madam Minister, I will allow you to answer. Look, it's important to support businesses and the entire sector. This bill allows for clean economy investment tax credits, and we have undertaken to support the sector, critical minerals, and fabric manufacturers, and you will support us, I hope.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to the Minister, thank you for coming. And my colleague here asked about security risk in terms of Chinese manufactured EVs, and even my colleague from the Bloc asked the same question. It's unfortunate that our Liberal members of this committee find that discussion point as destructive, when other countries around the world have made it clear they will not allow Chinese manufactured electric vehicles near their governmental operations or military bases. And I think this is important because we're talking about the ability to extract data from a country, especially since we all know China and Russia are actually contemplating getting through the Northwest Passage in the Arctic of Canadian sovereign waters. So I'll just ask a direct question. In terms of your mandate, in terms of bringing in EVs from China, has the issue of security ever been on your desk?
So I will respond by saying that if the Conservatives really cared about security issues, they would make sure that their leader got the security clearance to be able to get this information. And so, no,
wait a minute.
I mean, you're asking about security issues. I'm answering about
politicizing an issue where you know for a fact that if you did get security issues, we would not be able to question these issues. And on behalf of Canadians, on behalf of our riding members, we've got to hold government to account. And it's just a clear question. Has the issue of security ever been across your desk in terms of acquiring at least 50,000 manufactured EVs coming from China?
So, two things. My work as Minister of Environment is on parts like the regulatory piece that we've just talked about on EVs. But let me say the second piece. Absolutely, if your party cared about knowing about security risks, your leader would get the clearance. Every other leader has gotten that clearance.
The issue of security with Chinese manufactured EVs has never come across your desk. You've never talked about it. It's never been brought to your attention.
I am saying, sir, is that if you actually want to keep coming to me about security issues, there's a way for your party to get the information you want. The leader of the Bloc, the leader, obviously the Prime Minister, you know,
I'm not in charge of buying 49,000 EVs from China, but it's on everybody's mind in terms of Canadian sovereignty, in terms of security, espionage. Has the issue of security ever come across your desk as a talking point even? In terms of purchasing 49,000 EVs from China?
I'm not the Minister of Public Safety. As I said, I'm the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. My work, and actually a day to celebrate for our country, is that we have an automobile strategy that's going to make sure Canadians have access to the vehicles that are being purchased right around the world while reducing emissions and while building a strong industry right here in our country.
I tell you what, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt that, yes, it's not your file. So I'm going to assume that your answer is no, it's never come across your desk, and I will forward this question to the appropriate minister. Okay? Thank you. Hey, I've got another question in terms of the oil emissions cap. Thank you for the answer to my question, by the way. I actually submitted a question to your department on whether or not LNG Canada Phase 2 would be subject to the oil and gas emissions cap, the national oil and gas emissions cap. And your answer was pretty much similar to your opening statement. And but curiously, your last paragraph basically said that the oil and gas emissions cap would not be implemented if the Alberta MOU is successful. Can you give me a timeline on when some type of comparable emissions plan will be made public to replace the oil and gas emissions cap nationally? So it was in our budget 2025, very clearly was in the climate competitiveness strategy, that there were certain pieces, and this is based on expert advice from environmental experts that we had received, that if we had strong enhanced methane regulations, if we have a strengthened industrial carbon price, that there is a path to and carbon capture, that there would be a path to not needing to go forward with an oil and gas emissions cap. We are currently working on strengthening the industrial carbon price. I hope that the Conservatives will support us. It's a great economic initiative, and it helps our industries right here in Canada. We have put in place enhanced methane regulations, and we are continuing to work. And you know what? Right in this Budget Implementation Act is actually support for carbon capture. So I'm hoping you will support that. The timeline, the way I read it, is the timeline will be based on an application being made for a pipeline being built to the west coast of British Columbia, and then the clock will start ticking to see if the Alberta MOU actually proceeds or not, and that's when the comparable emissions caps will be considered to replace the national emissions cap.
I'll allow you a short answer.
It was very clearly set out in the budget. The wording is very clear. I set it out myself, and I do not agree with the paraphrasing that's been proposed by the member opposite there.
Mrs. Miedema, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here, Minister. And I, too, would like to offer congratulations on our auto strategy. And not only do I think it's a really wonderful path forward, but I think it's another example of the way our government is trying to really consider environment and climate issues and addressing the crisis across all of the major works that we're doing across all of the departments. And I've heard you say before, this is, you know, when environment and climate becomes part of the thinking across all departments and all ministers, this is how we actually get things done. And I saw firsthand and drove firsthand that very thing in Halifax when I was working as the Director of Environment and Climate Change. The way we saw progress and buy-in and momentum was really, really involving all departments and just making it part part of a necessary consideration across all major works. So huge congratulations on that. Je vais demander mon premier question.
I will put my first question in French. So, clauses 595 and 596 would make it easier to manage regulations at all levels of government, including Indigenous, while respecting CEPA regulations approaches. So, what are the cooperative approaches that the federal government is focusing on to allow more decision-making power to the various levels of government? Thank you. To begin with, I'm very pleased to see that you've used this opportunity to mention what you have done for the environment in your prior work in Halifax. This has had a good effect. I've seen that as parliamentary secretary when I visited Halifax to send in some EV recharging stations, and I also saw the effects in the work on the buildings that are very low carbon, and it's important to underscore how we can work together and how to do it, and it really illustrates what we're discussing here today. We need to work with the other levels of government. That's what we're saying here. It's not merely a federal responsibility. We need to be able to work well with other levels of government to ensure we do reach results. We need to be able to accept and allow for things being different in different areas of the country. So when we're able to enter into equivalency agreements with provinces, what it basically means is that we will have the same targets, we're heading in the same direction, but that the way a specific province gets there may be different from the way other provinces do so. What we put forward here in this bill is greater flexibility for entering into these equivalency agreements. As I say, same target, same results are aimed for, but they may just have a different way of getting there. What counts for us as well, what's really important is having these agreements continued beyond 5 years. Right now, they terminate at 5 years, so we really don't have time to take advantage of an agreement before you have to go back to negotiations, go back to the table. It's a waste of time and a waste of energy, nor does it allow us to plan long-term. So these changes proposed in this bill will ensure that we are able to work more efficiently and better with provinces, thanks to agreements that are focused on the long term. Thank you.
It's optimizing. It's more efficient. We're reducing red tape. We're being more flexible. Like, it all sounds like great news, especially from a government perspective. Extreme weather events are having a major impact, as we all know, on the well-being of our communities across Canada, including, of course, Halifax and Nova Scotia. Our committee's recently been conducting a study here on the impacts of extreme weather events driven by climate change. This is focused mainly on the insurance industry, but also on the very real impacts of extreme weather on all Canadians. How is our government taking action to combat increased extreme weather events in the Budget Implementation Act?
So there are many different pieces, and I think that it's really important that when you're highlighting the fact that, like, climate change is real, but I'm not trying to say that in a light way. Like, communities are feeling the impact right now. And so there are the two pieces of how do we fight climate change and its continued impacts, but also how do we help Canadians to manage through with, being able to adapt. And in fact, actually, I believe I was with you in Halifax when we announced how we were helping municipalities, including small municipalities, to come up with those plans so that they can better protect themselves and plan for the future. Those are very tactile projects that help in small communities right across our country, and it's important we continue it.
Monsieur Bonnet, la parole est à vous pour 2.5.
Mr. Brunel, you have 2.5 minutes. I would like to ask whether my colleagues agree to taking a minute of our time and providing it to our honourable colleague from Saanich Gulf Island, who is here present. I would agree to that. What would you like? Well, I wonder if my colleagues all support this. Yes, I see the Liberals support this. How about the Conservatives? Well, let me explain this first. The time is yours. Your time is yours. You may use it as you wish. I see that my Liberal colleagues are in agreement to this very well. You don't need anyone's permission. Thank you, Chair. So, Madam Minister, when it comes to finances, we've been told about more support to carbon capture and storage, $3 million more from now through 2035 for oil and gas companies. Is this the amount that you have, the extra federal backing? Yes, we have the carbon and capture investment tax credits for electricity as well, but how many billions? It's quite a bit for Quebec. Do you have 3 billion as well? 3 billion, rather. I would say that it's very important to ensure that the Bloc supports this so we can get this through to allow for a better electricity grid. 3 billion. The amounts are in the documents that you have been provided with. Very well, so you're agreeing 3 billion. Have you calculated how much it will cost, this Canada-Alberta agreement, and basically how much will it cost in loss in greenhouse gas advantages? Clean energy. Very happy you've put this question because we're not losing ground. This is exactly what we're speaking of today. We're talking about equivalency agreements. So if we have these equivalency agreements with provinces, they must demonstrate that they are reaching the same targets, the same results. Okay, so you're telling me 300 million barrels is, not going to make a difference. They're working on methane. It's going to balance that out. We're not moving more slowly on methane. There are regulations about methane that were finalized in December. We think it should be about 62% in reduction of methane. And then, of course, there are other measures in place as well. I say this because I know that you always like to bring up pipelines, and we have seen recently that the Bloc Québécois, or Parti Québécois actually in Quebec, have decided that they will no longer bar pipelines in Quebec. Do you agree with that for Quebec? I will...
Patrick Bonin, Bloc Québécois, and hello, Minister. I'm curious. I don't like omnibus bills. This one is enormous, over 600 pages. So I've been reading for quite a while when I wondered, why is the International Rivers Improvements Act being amended? Why is the Wildlife Act being amended? Why is the Migratory Birds? So I finally, of course, was able to trace it down to the fact we're creating a new tribunal, the Environmental Protection Tribunal. It is hard to read word for word through 600 pages. I almost missed Division 5, and well, we'll talk about that some other day. I'm wondering why we are now creating. We've had experience with the Canadian Environmental Protection Act for about 30 years. And now we're creating something called an Environmental Protection Tribunal and wrapping up a role that we were familiar with chief review officers. I wonder, how will this affect judicial reviews? We've had federal... Okay. Question. The question is why? What's the background? What's the rationale for the Environmental Protection Tribunal, and will it be a quasi-judicial body?
Short answer, Minister.
Pretty much out of time, but to say that we continue to be actually remaining strong on the Canada Environmental Protection Act and on our wildlife protections, and be happy to talk with you further offline when we're done.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yes. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mrs. May. Mr. Bexty, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, witnesses, for attending today. I find it frustrating come into committee sometimes, especially when divisive, evasive comments come from the minister. I have a question related to plastics and the recent changes. You've labeled plastic straws, utensils, and bags as toxic. So why is it okay for Canada to make plastic bags and straws and send them to other countries, export them for good economic reasons, but not okay for Canadians to use them?
So first, let me say that we just recently had a decision from the Federal Court of Appeal that actually supported something that the Conservatives have fought us on all along, by the way, which is that we actually, not only that plastics can be toxic to the environment, but that the federal government has the ability
I
to be
understand that,
involved
but
in
why are you allowing the export of products that we can't use here at home?
So just to continue, because this is shocking news that now the Conservatives are actually supporting that we would have a listing of plastics as toxic. So I have not heard that support
At all. I mean, I'm wondering about the regulatory hypocrisy. Like, it's something that we've been using domestically and globally for a long time, safely, hygienically, wonderful products. All of a sudden, we can't use them in Canada, but now the government does a backflip, and we export them for economic reasons, but we can't use them at home. Why?
Right. So I'm just really kind of pushing back on the first part of your question to start with, which is, I think the federal court was quite clear that the sea otter choking on a plastic straw isn't going to be caring about its chemical composition. I think we have seen, and Canadians have seen.
That's a mechanical risk, not a toxic risk, and so you're obfuscating.
The court actually found it was a toxic risk. That was actually their finding. But the thing is, beyond that piece, I think that most Canadians.
So why are we exporting them?
So, you know, what I would say on that piece, but celebrating the part about us having taken these steps on plastics.
Why are we exporting? Don't divert into other avenues.
You know, with what I control and what we control what we do in this country, and we stand up for the best. We're working on global treaty negotiations so that we can move away from plastic waste globally.
Where is the most of the plastic waste hit the oceans? What part of the world?
I do not have the global piece of the world of which one, but we have the world's longest coastline, so we would have real issues from coast to coast.
But it's all about the introduction of plastics to the environment. I mean, most of that happens in Asia. I still don't have an answer to the question, though, as to why is it okay for Canada to export these materials for consumer use in other countries, but we can't use them here at home?
So we are domestically doing what we can to protect our
local
environment.
Why enable other countries to pursue a toxic?
Well, my hope is through global plastics treaties, we're actually going to move the world away from.
Why not stop exporting? I mean, that would contribute to your goals, right?
I think, well, first, common goals for all Canadians to not want to have plastics washing up on our shores and not have them in our green
So you're
spaces.
telling me that it's okay for plastic to fall in or be dumped into the Milk River in Montana, flow into Alberta, and that's okay because, you know, it's okay to export it to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
It still shows up on our shores. So I'm trying to understand the hypocrisy of the changes.
I feel like the hypocrisy is in having the Conservatives finally turn around and cheer that we actually have taken action on reducing
I wouldn't
plastics
call
waste.
this cheering.
But
I wouldn't call this cheering.
okay. Well, you know, I would hope that you would start cheering, sir, because I think it's important for us.
If you can, let's change topics here a little bit. Do you believe Canada should be an energy superpower?
Absolutely.
Then, so the reason I ask this is that I heard directly from Canadians, energy leaders, and recent reports in the Globe and Mail suggesting that while your government talks about Canada being an energy superpower, its policies are sending very mixed signals to investors. We're still not seeing investment in energy industries as required to achieve that. We still don't see pipelines to all three coasts that we need to achieve that aim. What are you doing to enable that?
In this Budget Implementation Act, we have a clean electricity ITC that actually will
The scalability of clean electricity is not anywhere close to the opportunities in nuclear and oil and gas in order to truly become an energy superpower.
There is, in
what
fact,
are you doing for the easiest, best, lowest hanging fruit?
So interesting, though, because also the clean manufacturing tax credit, I believe, does help nuclear. Our major projects include the Darlington nuclear plant.
Understand that.
We have also put in place through our major projects office with referrals, clean electricity through Wind West. These are opportunities. Offshore wind is a huge opportunity for our country. So we are absolutely able
That's
to be
not exportable
an
power,
energy,
though. That's not the definition of an energy superpower.
Is
Is
not
exportable
what
power.
those
Point of order.
I think the Atlantic provinces would disagree with you on that.
Mr. Saint-Pierre?
Just point of order. On a few occasions, there's pretty loud discussion, so I think we can all hear each other quite well. So we're just asked to maybe calm the voice. I don't have as loud of a voice as some other members, but just to be mindful. Thank you.
Thank you. It's noted. Let's be joyful. Huh? So, Mr. Fanjoy, talking about joy.
Thank you. Thank you. It's noteworthy that my esteemed Conservative colleagues were talking about security, and I think it's worth pointing out and I thank the Minister for pointing out the disconnect between their words and deeds. First of all, addressing climate change is a national security matter, and second of all, their leader is unique amongst leaders of all federal parties in this Parliament in not having his top security clearance, a subject which I have recently sponsored a petition. It's the initiator of the petition is a Canadian in Carleton. He's a retired RCMP, member of the RCMP, who in his career specialized in national security investigations.
Point of order, Chair. Point of order. This is important work. We get the minister for a very limited amount of time. I don't understand how this is relevant to the work of this committee. It's highly political. It's taking up time when the minister is here and could be addressing some real concerns relating to the work of this committee. I don't appreciate the banter, and I would just ask that we would return back to the important work of the committee.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. It was my esteemed. This question has to be answered. This point of order has to be answered first. I have my own point of order.
Do you want it to be answered by me, or can it be answered by the member?
I'm speaking to the committee through the chair.
Oh, but before you do your point of order, can you respond to her point of order? Would you have a response for her point of order? Is that the way it works?
No, that's not.
You want me to decide on the point of order? Is that it?
That's normally.
Is that what you're asking the chair? Because you didn't ask the chair, so I figured.
That's what a point of order is, though, isn't it?
Well, yes and no. It depends.
I can address through the chair. Not a problem. So, Chair, I don't see the relevance. I think it's political banter, and there's important work that this committee has to do, and I'm just asking what it has to do with this work of this committee. Given the fact that the minister is here, we've requested her to come several times. She's finally here, and now this is just a back and forth that this Liberal member wants to have. That's all.
Your comment is noted. I understand where you're coming from. I was once too sitting on that side and raised those kind of comments and made many other comments that were relevant or not. But I just need to highlight that when each member is asking questions, he can ask the question he preferred to ask or make the comments he preferred to ask. To debate if there's a relevance or not, well, he's referring to the comments at the beginning of your questioning, actually, which was with respect to security. So there's a fine line right there. So,
but he's talking about a petition coming out of his riding, and we're talking about Chinese EVs. Like, I don't see the relevance, Chair.
Well, there's
with all due respect, I just
direct relevance, but there's common ground with respect to security, with respect to issues, and I guess he's going to explain that. I'm not the one who can explain that, but
he can present his petition. There's levers available to him to present his petition on the floor of the House of Commons. I don't know why he's burning up committee time talking about a petition out of his riding.
Maybe you can ask him the question and we can get an answer to that.
Well, I have to address through chair.
Well, you can ask the question through the chair. I'll allow it if you want, on free time if you want. Would you like to respond to that, or would you had a point of order as well?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to request my time back.
Your time has been stopped, so don't worry about that.
I would also like to note for the committee that it was my member, esteemed colleague from Newfoundland, who brought up security earlier in this session. The issue is security, and I'm making the point that that addressing climate change is a matter of national security, perhaps the greatest matter of national security as we see impacts all across the nation, including in her riding and in many of our ridings.
You're conflating the issue. I mean, really, what we're talking about, the EV mandate, in relation to what the minister is here for. And this is a security issue for EV mandates around the world. But now you're talking about petitions, you're talking about our leader, you're talking about everything else, and you're talking about now you're trying to twist it into the security of the national climate crisis. I mean, really, we're supposed to be here on behalf of our membership, our ridings, and these are important questions. I do agree with you on that point. These are important questions. But it's not for our political interests, it's not for our parties, it's not for our leaders. It's for the people of Canada in terms of where our country's going. So conflating the issue is not helping.
Point of order.
1 second. Noted. Mr. Ross, would you want me to respond to you, or do I?
Oh, yeah, through the chair, of course, because I'm not clear on that.
Who would you like a response from, me or the member?
The member.
Well, before I let the member speak, I just want to note that we've already put 5 minutes on this. And if we're talking about time with the minister, I just want to bring you all back to reality that she'll be leaving within the some time shortly. So I understand this is an important issue. I don't want to steer it in any direction, but I just want to bring us to reality with respect to time. Mr. Fanjour, the floor is yours to respond to Mr. Ross's point of order.
Yes. Unless I'm mistaken, my time is my time to use as I see fit. I understand that this is an issue which makes my Conservative colleagues uncomfortable. They should be uncomfortable about it. The petition that was launched less than a week ago, again initiated by an individual in the riding of Carleton who had a career in national security investigations, has already over 34,000 signatures. So this is a matter which is of great interest to not just people in Carleton, but all across the country. We have people signing from across the country, and the minister, I congratulate you for calling out that hypocrisy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Minister, thank you very much for joining us today. Since administration and equivalency agreements will no longer be automatically renewed after 5 years, how will the government make sure that environmental protection standards do not weaken and continue to reflect the best available science?
Right, thanks. I just wanted to be sure to clarify that one of the challenges we have right now is that we have a 5-year hard stop, and then we have to start renegotiating. So, and you don't start renegotiating at 5 years; you start renegotiating before that. So it means that there's this constant cycle of negotiating. The most important piece that, if I was going to say about how equivalency works and why they're important, you get to the same outcome. Like it's the whole point is that they get to the same outcome. And in fact, that's strengthened in the wording of this BIA. But what happens now is that there's a longer timeline that can be applied to that. And in some industries especially, it might make more sense to have that longer timeline. And all of this is about, when we talk about climate competitiveness, this is at the center of what we're talking about climate competitiveness. We are working cooperatively with provinces and territories to make sure that we can build the economy of the future. As you said, like, climate is it's a national issue for so many reasons. And I've said this before, and we might be there because we care deeply about the future we're going to give to our children, as we should. But it is also an economic imperative. And that's what's so frustrating when I see a bill like this being obstructed, because there are opportunities in this bill from clean investment tax credits in electricity. That helps us build more interties. That helps build out the backbone of the clean economy future for our country. But there are also other investment tax credits in here for manufacture and like that will expand and create more of those opportunities. And because of the obstruction we've been facing, we can't move these forward. So we really need to move past the obstruction that we've seen and actually be able to put these really important climate-focused tax credits, but also like economically important to our country. I believe we have everything it takes to have the strongest economy and a low-carbon economy future. But if the Conservatives keep holding us back from being able to move in that direction, they're holding back not just our future on reducing emissions, they're holding back our economic capability, and that's going to impact workers in all of our communities. So if we all want that future, that bright future, and I think we do, good paying jobs, reducing emissions so that we have cleaner air in our communities and that we are reducing the impact of natural disasters, that we have a future where our homes are heated in a way that is not like cheaper, because we're using electricity and we're using heat pumps and we're using solar panels and all this. That future of being able to get around in electric vehicles that are cheaper to maintain and are cheaper in day-to-day use, all of that is a brighter future for our country, and we just need to move past the Conservative obstruction and get to the point where we can have it.
Thank the Minister for her present. We will suspend for the next panel. Thank you.